Hi all, let's have a look at another fascinating and instructive Magnus Carlsen game. This is from the Norway chess. It's an Armageddon game. So this was an unusual tournament actually. There were classical games worth 2 points for a win. In case of a draw, players got half a point and played an Armageddon game for the remaining points. So this is that Armageddon game. They drew in the main classical game. So players received 2 hours each for the classical game in 10-second increments. Only after move 40, no draw offers allowed until move 30. In this Armageddon game, white has 10 minutes to black 7, with a 3-second increment from move 61. In case of a draw, the player with the black pieces gets the full point. So it's very interesting. So black just needs to draw really. Yeah, white has 10 minutes to black 7. So e4 from Levon Aronian. So Magnus plays c5, the Sicilian, and we repeat actually what happened in the classical game up to here. Bishop b5. We have g6, bishop takes c6, d takes. So this helps exert influence over that critical d4 square. This is thought to be one of the strongest moves actually. Counterintuitive, but helping coordinate against d4. So d3, bishop g7, h3 to avoid any pin, e5, white castles, queen c7, bishop e3, b6, knight bd2. So it looks as though this is a nice square to use, the c4 square, because if black ever plays b5, this weakens the structure. Knight e7. But actually, in fact, white is interested more in undermining this pawn chain and activating more potentially this rook. So this is a classic undermining procedure to hit c5, in fact. a3. Black castles, b4, Magnus takes, a takes, f5, knight c4, which has a concrete threat. I wonder if you can guess here, based on this a file. If black played the casual f4, guess what would happen? So f4, what has white got if I give you 5 seconds? Okay, white would have bishop takes b6 using that pinned pawn. So Magnus has to be very careful. Bishop e6, and it seems as though doesn't this run into knight g5? If he played actually bishop d7, it gives white a slightly freer hand. The bishop on e6 actually points at f takes. If this move, white can play something like rook a3, and for example like this, white is getting a significant advantage. It's quite a tricky position. So bishop e6, not giving white the opportunity really to play rook a3 as easily. If rook a3 was played here, then f takes e4, undermining the knight on c4. And this position is bishop d5. It gets slightly interesting, and white may have an edge, but it's a little bit tricky. This for black is quite interesting. So knight g5, kicking that bishop immediately. If white messes around here with rook e1, perhaps h6 to take away the g5 square, and f4, and this should be quite interesting for black. So knight g5 immediately, and now the bishop goes to d7, and we see queen e2. Here, if rook a3 now, because it seems quite natural to try and put pressure on the a7 pawn. If this happens, white does have a small edge. Okay, but queen e2, h6, f4, bishop d2. Now this is really quite interesting. How I love doing this stuff, stretching out on the king side, as many of you know. But white's trying to hit hard the dark squares here, and the bishop's going back to c3 here to hit e5. So g5, bishop c3. Black is supporting e5, and now white is hitting e5 again. So this whole battle over e5, this arm wrestling battle, a bit like a kind of Roy Lopez, only Roy Lopez, hitting e5 again. E takes, bishop takes, and again the kind of battle for the central squares with g4, trying to get a pinned knight out of this. hd, bishop takes g4. So now immediately threatening bishop takes d4. To take is often a mistake, as a famous grandmaster on YouTube says. So taking on g7 just helps black here. c3 much better to support the bishop. If taking, that queen's getting a nice diagonal and there's knight h4, for example, like this, or maybe rook a d8 first, but there's always knight h4. Black's getting a big advantage there. So definitely taking on g7 would just help black. So we have c3. So this battle over the e5 square is very interesting. c5, trying to, again, nudge away white from the central squares. Now bishop takes, queen takes. Knight d6. Black is looking forward to knight h4, but is there a spanner in the works being set here with knight f5? So this is a bit, it's in the style of Tigran Petrosian. There's a famous game against Boris Spassky, but Boris Spassky overstretched to attack and left himself open to exchange sacrifices, etc. But here is white, in Armenian style of Petrosian, is white trying to tap into black's weaknesses. Black does have, it's not the prettiest pawn structure, 4 different islands, but this pin is a major feature of the position as well. There's also the potential for this check. So what is actually going on here to unpin? We see king h8. So knight h4 does run into that nasty check, and then knight takes h4 would be the end of the game. Black would have to resign. So king h8, but now white gets his hooks into f5. And Magnus now plays an exchange sack, rook takes f5. If he plays bishop takes f5, losing that precious light square bishop, then immediately there's light square punishment awaiting black here, for example like this, or more sensible rook a f8. This is a big advantage for white. White is dominating the position here. Things like rook b7. If 2 pigs on the 7th come, that's the end of black. So 2 rooks on the 7th, they sometimes call pigs on the 7th. So rook, so in this interesting, it may be absolutely necessary, and reinforces this pin exploitation with knight h4. And things get really super tactical, especially for a blitz game here. White plays a forcing move, f6. So in fact there's no time here for knight takes f3, even though that's check, because queen takes f3, I believe, because of this f takes, and that looks at the rook there. So in fact f6, and now we have queen takes, and now this is really quite remarkable. Rook a6, this remarkable calculation of forcing moves from Levon Aronian. Rook a6, hitting the queen like this. Who would have thought? So queen g7, and it gets even more remarkable now. Guess what Levon Aronian plays in this position? It's a really interesting unpinning tactic that white plays. If I give you 5 seconds, what does white play? Very dramatic. Okay, a radical unpin with rook takes h6 check, just to be able to grab queen e5 check, so unpinning that knight. And now, in fact, there's 2 moves which are possible for white. White played the simpler move queen takes g7, but there is also knight takes h4, believe it or not. Although that leaves the queen hanging, there's knight g6. But the resulting positions here seem to be slightly in black's favour. For example, this is a fictional continuation where black's getting a slight edge. It's all very interesting actually to analyse the endgames here. If bishop c2 instead, then this passed a pawn does look pretty dangerous. But for example, we can get scenarios where even though this rook is stranded, white has c4 and knight c3 to break out. And if that's the case, then black would have to, for example, that's nasty. So if black has to play bishop takes e4 after c4, because knight c3, these are fictional endgames, but it should be about even. So yeah, these fictional endings after knight h4, they don't seem to do white too many favours. So we see queen takes g7, king takes, knight takes h4. So this endgame also, okay, it's equal on pawns. Black's got that outside pass pawn. This knight doesn't seem to be that happy in this position at the moment on the rim. It looks a bit silly and kind of cut off by the bishop at the moment, the movements of the knight. Okay, so we have a5 and now a4, and black's getting a more aggressive king. So the king's walking over, king d5, and now f3, which actually takes away some backward gears for the knight. The knight is given f5 for the moment now, and we see actually here, instead of king d2, white may have considered knight f5. For example, there is an idea if the bishop moves to play g4 to reinforce that knight. In this case, these endings are kind of interesting to consider, where black is actually winning there quite easily, in fact. If king d1, that's another fictional ending, then again, black with best play should be able to get an advantage. For example, like this, there's a stranded rook on a3 basically, and if black can start coordinating on f3, which is a downside of g4 weakening f3, then black's going to get a big advantage out of this, capitalize on that g4 here. So there's lots of interesting endgames going on. Another example, if rook b8 there, this kind of thing is also interesting. Yeah, black's getting a bit of a big advantage. So it's not that inspiring, knight f5, but what is about to happen is quite interesting. Bishop e8, king c1, king c4, as if, well, where is the king going? Is it going to d3? And the knight ventures out to f5 here, and we see a6. The threat is knight d6 check, so if that was a, well, then it's knight d6 check. Yeah, so for example, knight d6 needs to be parried. So let's say, so that happened, rook a6, knight g7. Now here, so knight g7, where is this knight actually going? If g4, king d3, that's the big problem. f3 is quite compromised. And this position, rook e6, check. Bishop g6, yeah, this is much better for black. So this is big trouble. Now this ending, knight g7. We see bishop g6, and this knight seems to be running out of squares, if you look at it. It really hasn't got that many squares. They're all been taken away. The rook's taken away e6. So in fact, has the knight been stranded? After king d2, king d5, in fact, the king's coming back for dinner here, for that knight. The knight's the main course here. The game ended here. Yeah, where is the knight going after king e5 and f6? So for example, king c1, king e5, the knight's not really going anywhere, and the rook's in prison as well. So this would be kind of amusing for black, at least. So yeah, the game ended here. So I thought actually it did kind of ensure this tournament format decisive games. I think they're trying to avoid the situation where you have this super grandmaster tournament and most of the games end in draws, and I guess they don't like YouTubers like me that hate just covering, people like me don't like covering draws necessarily, because there are plenty of beautiful historical master games and immortal games to cover. So why would we generally cover draws? So the format of this tournament with the Armageddon really supports decisive games, which is one of the reasons, I guess, yes, hands up, I'm covering this game. It was a decisive game after the main classical game, which is the more serious game. Now, some grandmasters scorn this kind of deterioration of time limit to create blunders, but you know, I think a lot of online chess activity is blunderful, and people seem to like that. And I think personally, I just think there's so many distractions in the modern world, like Netflix, etc., and other games, that time is precious, as Kasparov said. So I don't know if the popularity of the game, I think, is going to be more, as I see it, in the faster time limits in the future. What do you think about that? The excitement of the game. So yeah, we're looking at these, but they've still got a lot of ideas and variations, even at this time limit. to check out. These are chess geniuses, absolute chess geniuses, so we can only admire their skills at the faster time limits as well, I believe. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this, checking out this game a little bit, and I hope you check out that bit.ly link. Come and register at chessworld.net, play against me or other YouTubers. I'll try and keep up these the coverage of these past Magnus Carlsen games and go on to some maybe immortal games of the past, or the new Leela games as they come out in TSEC soon. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much.